Hey guys, it's Danny. Today we're gonna talk about bud blast. This is a subject that I did talk about a lot of years ago, but obviously that video was not the best of qualities, and also lately I did get quite a few comments to elaborate on the subject more, to go more in depth, and I thought it would be a good idea to redo this video because in the meantime I did learn a little bit more, I've gained a little bit more experience, so I'm gonna try to make an in-depth, coherent topic out of it. So with that said, let's first explain what bud blast is. So as the name suggests, the phenomenon refers to buds. Pretty much refers to the falling of the buds prematurely before they even get a chance to open. And it's pretty easy to imagine that it is a rather frustrating situation, particularly if you have an orchid which only produces 1 or 2 buds. If you lose one of them, pretty much the entire blooming of the orchid might be compromised. There are many reasons why bud blast can happen, and of course it really depends on context, so let's just go through the most common reasons why buds would blast. The most common reason why orchids lose buds before they open are usually environmental reasons, but because there are multiple factors here, let's just take them one by one. Let's start with temperature. There are some orchids which are very temperature sensitive when it comes to their buds, and Phalaenopsis sallie are one of them. This year as well I experienced bud blast with some Phalaenopsis that were growing next to my window. Since the temperatures outside were low and my window was very cold, it actually influenced the orchid and I did lose a bud, but in the end I didn't have major losses. Low temperature is not the only culprit. Hot temperature can be a reason as well. And even though Phalaenopsis do have a sensitivity to it, all orchids are prone to react bad to temperature fluctuations when they have buds. So things like open windows in wintertime, if it's very cold in your area during winter, the cold draft from an AC, the hot air from a radiator, all of these things can actually contribute to bud blast. There is a degree of variation between the responses, of course depending on the species or variety of orchid, but at least with Phalaenopsis and with most other orchids we commonly find on the market, it is actually a good idea to maintain things temperate to warm while the orchids have buds, and definitely try to avoid very hot or very cold drafts. Another environmental factor is light. If orchids don't get enough light to be able to photosynthesize properly, they will have issues feeding the buds that are developing. So when you have an orchid with buds, do make sure that the light is adequate. At the same time, make sure that you're not placing your orchid in direct sunshine. Very hot sun can burn leaves as it is, but even buds are sensitive. And in this case, it actually has to do with temperature as well. Overheating of the buds can lead to them blasting. And lastly, humidity. A very sudden and big decrease in humidity, especially if you just purchased the orchid and you don't know the environment it's coming from, or you already have adjusted it to a certain humidity and now you moved it to a totally different place, some orchids will suffer due to water loss through transpiration. Buds can lose water and become dehydrated as well. Just as important as environmental factors are the health factors. Orchids which are sick or have been recently stressed are more likely to lose buds. And it kind of makes sense if we think about rootless orchids, for example. They cannot hydrate themselves properly, thus they cannot hydrate and open the buds properly. Also, in lack of enough leaves, orchids don't photosynthesize properly. And again, this can lead to a shortage of sugars, which can affect buds. And in the case of orchids, even though they can photosynthesize with their roots, the epiphytic ones, it's just not enough to produce the amount of sugars they need to produce and fully develop buds and flowers. Fungal infections, bacterial infections, crown rot, stem rot, all of these things do affect the orchid entirely. And if the orchid is affected in any way, the buds can suffer as well. So it is actually a very good idea to stress these orchids as less as possible. That's why many people suggest that you don't actually repot orchids which are in bloom or that have buds, because there is a chance they will go through this transplant shock. And they will be stressed, and the stress they will go through can potentially affect the blooms and the buds. On this subject, we can actually elaborate quite a lot. I'm not gonna go through all of the ailments, all of the stress factors orchids can go through, because we're gonna spend a whole day here, but do imagine that everything which can potentially stress an orchid enough to affect its balance can affect the buds as well. Related to health and stress problems, we can talk about pests as well. There are many pests which can actually suck the juices from the buds and from the flowers, making them fall prematurely. Things like mealy bugs, or aphids are known to cause premature bud loss and even flower loss. There are other pests which can definitely make buds fall, such as thrips, but most of the ones that I personally found were aphids and mealy bugs. I do have a solution for them. It works beautifully both with mealy bugs and aphids, but also with spider mites. I'll link you to my video down below. It is a mineral oil solution, and if used properly, it actually yields really good results. However, spraying water or oils on buds can actually damage them or even make them fall. So in this case, it is a rather fine balance, and we need to take a decision based on what we see. If the infestation is really heavy, then treating it might actually be worth the risk of actually losing the buds, because we would lose them anyway. If you only see one mealybug or 2 aphids, you can actually remove them manually, keep the orchid separated and under observation. But if you find these insects on your orchid, then most probably this is why it's losing its buds. Since we discussed about spraying things on the buds, let's talk about Botrytis or other ailments or damages we can cause by spraying the buds. Water droplets can actually lead to a fungal infection called Botrytis. In most cases, it will only spot the buds, so you'll have a spotted flower, but in some cases, if the infection is heavy enough, some of the buds can actually drop. Likewise, substances such as leaf shine, oils, pest treatments, foliar feeds, and other substances which we might use with our orchids can actually damage the buds. They are a lot more sensitive than leaves and other structures because they don't have cuticles to protect them, and they can get damaged very easy. Even water can damage them if it doesn't evaporate in time. Fast water evaporation can actually prevent botrytis, but usually in a home environment we don't have enough air movement, let alone wind, so it is a very good idea to avoid spraying anything on the buds if we don't actually need to spray. If we're dealing with pests, then again we need to make a decision on what we're gonna do, but if the orchid is perfectly fine, it doesn't have any infections or infestations, it is a very good idea to avoid any droplets of any kind, any substance, anything we actually dose to the orchid, even fertilized water. Just keep everything away from the buds. A cause which is more common than you think, and sadly there isn't anything we can do about it, is genetics, especially with hybrids, but not only. The genetical information of the orchid might make it so that it will produce more buds than it can actually handle, so the orchid will choose to develop some of them, while others will just be blasted purposely by the orchid. In this case, we are not dealing with an infestation or infection or stress of any kind. Well, we can actually talk about stress of energy consumption, but it isn't actually influenced by the environment or us. As I was saying, this happens a lot with hybrids, depending on the genes it has. Imagine that an orchid which produces tiny little flowers in big numbers is hybridized with an orchid that produces larger flowers in smaller numbers. The outcome can be an orchid which produces larger flowers, but will try to do so in great numbers. And obviously, it does not have the structures to properly handle all of them. So it will develop as many as it can, but some might be lost. In this instance, there isn't anything we can do or that we should do if we're not dealing with environment or pests or anything of the sorts. Another reason which I personally have never encountered because I was never in this position is the presence of methane or ethylene gas coming usually from ripening fruit in a household. The presence of this gas can actually make buds fall before they even open because it is a hormone for the plant. I'll link you to more articles down below that talk about this so you can learn more. I personally have never experienced it. I've never kept my orchids next to fruit because I did not keep my orchids in the house, so I cannot tell you firsthand how often it happens. I think it will be a fun experiment to try it out, so you guys should let me know in the comment section. Do you want me to try out and purposely blast some buds just to see how real the danger is and how much it can affect? I don't know, let me know down below. But many articles do suggest that ripening fruit next to orchids can actually cause bud blast. So I'm putting it out there just for you guys to have it in mind and to try to avoid it. Also, gas lamps and other things that work on gas, they can cause bud blast because of the existence of gas in the air. But again, nothing that I've ever tried. So if you've ever experienced this, do let us know down below in the comment section. And let us know how severe was the outcome. Did you lose all of the buds or just one or two? Or you actually had fruit and gas lamps and everything in the room next to the orchid and nothing happened? I am genuinely curious. And lastly, it could actually be normal behavior. There are species of orchids out there which actually produce a lot of flowers. In some cases, it is plausible to think that the orchid, through evolutionary means, is overproducing just because some of the buds will run the risk of actually being ripped off or damaged before they even open, so the orchid overproduces buds and flowers just so it makes sure that at least some of them will open. Now, this is more theoretical than anything else, but I did actually encounter those cases with actual species, not hybrids, which looked perfect. The environment was okay, there were no health issues or pests. They were the type that did produce a lot of buds, and some of the buds simply didn't mature, although a big number of them did open. So in the end, I'm thinking that this can be a plausible scenario as well. But again, this is not a fact, just some of my experiences. Now, of course, there might be other causes, but I did not experience them yet. They might not be as often as the ones we talked about today. And even if there are multiple causes for buds to blast, don't imagine that it is a super common phenomenon. It does happen more often than I would like, of course, but it doesn't happen with all orchids all of the time, so don't worry about it. If you do have bud blast with an orchid, do make a mental list of all of these things and try to think if anything can apply to the orchid. Correcting it should correct bud blast as well. So that said, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this. Thank you for suggesting. And you know the drill, like or dislike this video below, subscribe to my channel for regular orchid videos, tutorials, Q&As, and other fun orchid subjects. And if you like YouTube to notify you whenever I upload a new video, just turn on notifications for my channel. And if you're interested in my setup and everything that I use, do expand the description. I list everything there. And with that said, I'll see you guys next time. Bye!